The following are true scary stories found on the subreddits Let's Not Meet and Creepy Encounters. I am including a viewer discretion in this video. The second story is a little graphic, and the images are meant to induce nightmares. So I hope you enjoy. And if you do, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you can catch all of my future content. Let's begin. I live in a small town where the only things to do are hang out at Walmart, go to the overpriced movie theater, or drive around. I was 15 at the time, so I only had my permit, but my 3 oldest friends had their licenses and cars already as they were 16. Oftentimes, I would find myself hanging out with my closest friend, Ray, as I was the only one who didn't have a job, and he only worked 4 hours after school at his mom's job. So we were practically the only ones who weren't busy and had time to hang out, especially during the weekends and summer break. Ray loved to drive, and I loved to go with him. He was hilarious, but also pretty cynical, but we got along like 2 peas in a pod once we finally started talking our freshman year. We would typically spend hours just driving around anywhere and everywhere, trying to find creepy roads and back roads or places where he could drift. He was pretty good at it, and we were dumb teenagers. Don't worry, we learned our lessons, but that's another story. This particular night, we were out driving around aimlessly through a small town 20 minutes south of us, just talking about anything and everything. We get out on the back roads in an area we've never been before, so we just decide to do some harmless exploring. When we decide we've had enough, he turns into a driveway to turn around, but both the driveway and the road were too narrow to do an actual U-turn. I'm not sure why he didn't just back out. I think maybe the house in the distance caught his eye, but he said we'd turn around up there. So as we pull up to turn around, I notice the house is in a poor state, but definitely occupied. There were rusted cars and trash and other junk strewed all over the yard, and the front porch had a few animal bones tied to the support beams and whatnot. I don't think it was particularly weird, since I'm used to this kind of stuff, and so is he, so we turn around and go about our merry way back to town. It's a few minutes before I notice that the beat-up truck that was parked in the yard was following us, high beams on and edging super close to Ray's bumper, and not backing off. I look at Ray, what the fucking, and he says they've been following us since we got out of their driveway, but he didn't want to scare me. At this point, I'm just mildly worried that we pissed him off turning in his driveway. But why would they want to follow us? I knew it was to scare us, but I would never understand what kind of a crazy person would go and do that kind of thing. The truck follows us all the way to the other edge of town, where the main road meets the highway. At this point, it's well past midnight and no one else is in town or on the highway. Ray books it onto the highway, heading in the opposite direction of town. But that way had a lot of back roads that spat you out on the highway at the very distant edge of our town. Plus he could speed through those roads since there were hardly any cops. At this point, the truck is still riding our ass and we're dipping into a valley where neither of us have service. As we turn down a back road that leads into our town, the truck disappears and we both breathe a sigh of relief. This road is just a straight shot from our town to the one we were in with hardly any traffic or houses nearby. After a few minutes, we relax, and I crack a joke about how that must have been the guy from Jeepers Creepers following us, and we laugh it off. 10 minutes later, we see 2 cars far ahead of us on the road with their hazards on. One is parked diagonally in our lane, and the other is parked off to the side of the road. It appeared like there was an accident, so we slowed down to scope it out and see if anyone needed any help. The cars looked completely fine, and we couldn't see anyone in or outside of the car as we moved closer, so we just looked at each other, wondering if we should stop. And this is where I kick myself for making that joke, because not even a few minutes later that truck was barreling down the road towards us with its high beams on, and I could see something to my right moving in the bushes in my peripheral. Ray just punches it, swerving around the crashed car and flying down the road, doing as fast as his car could, which was about 120 miles per hour, and we gained a significant amount of distance from the truck, but it was obvious it was still following us, and I was worried that maybe the other cars were tailing us too. As we start down a hill, Ray slows up a bit and swerves onto another private dirt road surrounded by forest, and then turns us around so we're facing the road we were just on, killing his car and turning off the lights. At this point, I ask if I should call the police, but he promised we would be okay. He has a huge aversion to the police for very good reasons, and we wait in silence. We see the truck and another car barrel past us, and I'm about to piss myself, thinking they saw our car, but they don't slow down or loop back around. We sat there for about another 20 minutes, waiting, and when they didn't come back, we booked it home. This is not the first or last time creepy or weird shit has happened to us in his car, but it was one of the scariest experiences I've had, even though nothing physical really happened. I think they were just really trying to scare us, and if so, they did. I didn't think our life was in danger, however, nor did Ray. It was just very frightening. The following may disturb some viewers. Beware. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. I came across this subreddit a few days ago, and I thought I'd share my experience. This happened to me back in 2005, right after I graduated uni. I live in a small town near the outskirts of London. It's not creepy or out of the way or anything, but it can get quite deserted at night. The night in question, me and a bunch of mates were going to all get together and go down to Fabric in central London. I was getting ready to leave the house when my girlfriend Sarah called with a bit of a problem, prompting me to tell my friends that they should go without me and I'll meet them there. I hopped on the bus and headed towards her place. A few hours later, I'd helped her sort through her crisis and was thinking I'd better make a move and head to the club. I asked her if she wanted to come, several times. She insisted she'd felt better and wanted to stay at home. Knowing better than to test her resolve, I left it at that and called a minicab. I was waiting for the cab at the front of the driveway when Sarah joined me for the wait. We were kissing when the car drove up. This was my first sign that something was wrong. We didn't hear him pull up because he was driving really slow with the headlights off. The only reason he grabbed our attention was because he turned on his bright lights at us. It was an old cream Mercedes station wagon. I ignored whatever apprehension I had because I thought I just had an active imagination. Okay, so he pulled up quietly. So what? Knowing what I do now, I'm so happy Sarah never agreed to come with me. I got in the cab and told the guy, who was in his mid-40s, that I wanted to head to Fabric in central London. He nodded his head while looking into his driver's side wing mirror. I said, "Did you hear me, mate?" He nods again, this time also letting a yes slip out. "That's quite a fare," he said, all while staring out the window. That's when I realized what he was staring at in his mirror. Sarah, walking back up the driveway. I was about to react when she got to the front door, but the cabbie beat me to it, turning and saying, "Can't have the little lady going in unescorted now, can we? All manner of deviants out there." This threw me a bit, as his whole behavior was off. But I also knew that's what I would have done had they been the other way around. And maybe this guy had kids himself. I decided to just talk to him, break the ice, and after about 5 minutes I felt at ease and slipped into a familiar conversation. Footy and women. It was all okay, until he started talking about his ex and his best friend, how they had been hooking up behind his back, and how he had kicked the ever-living shit out of his best friend for it. Then he started fixating on his ex, saying how all women were whores and liars and were only out for themselves, that men are only there to pay off their debts and their wants. He even tried to justify a time when he kicked the shit out of her, saying that men can be excusable for their actions if appropriately provoked. Then it got even weirder. He started talking to me about men, trans men, how he liked that they were the best of both worlds. They were something he could fuck, and they were also wired like men, and not out to get you. "Those she-men are tighter than a twisted screw. I like it when they bleed on my dick a little. Though some ladies are mighty fine, like that lass of yours." He turned around to stare at me through the mirror, almost testing my reaction. I'm man enough to say that I was freaking the fuck out at this point. And not only the conversation, but at the fact that the mobile phone I'd forgotten to charge had died halfway through his rant. Not one to show my fear, I asked him to stop off by the ATM so I could get cash to pay him at the end of the journey. He agrees, and for a moment I feel like it's all going to be over in a second, when he says that before he does that, he needs to take a piss. That's better, I thought. I can sneak out while he's peeing and bolt off. He turned off the main road and went through a random residential area before we finally found ourselves going onto a dirt road and heading towards the woods. "Mate, where the hell are we going? You can take a piss anywhere." He replied something along the lines that it was safer in the woods. That's when I noticed it. This particular car had no unlock features in the back, and a very quiet, slow tug on the door handle revealed that the child lock was on. I was trapped. He stopped the car near the edge of the woods and turned and asked if I wanted to join him. I declined and said that I was in a hurry and asked him to hurry up himself. This seemed to anger him and he slammed the door and vanished. I waited about 1 minute and tried to climb out of the driver's side, but it was locked too, and I was scared that my movement had alerted the cabbie just outside. Having tried and failed to restart my phone, I looked around to see if he left a phone or some kind of device that I could communicate with, but nothing. After nearly 10 minutes had gone by, I worked myself up to smashing the windows, figuring that this was no way a normal situation, and that abnormal measures could be taken. Just as I was getting into position, I heard a loud crash. It sounded like a massive branch had just hit the leaves below. I froze, not moving a muscle, not even my lungs. I wanted to be able to hear everything just at that moment. As my ears slowly tuned in, I began to hear two very distinct sounds, but both different intervals. The first was rustling sound, but it wasn't the wind. It sounded more like birds flying through the trees all at once. The second was a squelching slam. The slam only occurred 3 times, whereas the rustling was quite often. Then silence again. I decided not to wait any longer. My imagination was going wild as to what those sounds were, and I just wanted to get away as fast as my legs could carry me. I used to be on the track team. I leaned back and thrust my legs out as hard as I could and kicked the back seat window through. It shattered, and I wasted no time in shimmying through the broken window and outside. That's when it happened. My eyes focused in the dark, and I began to see that the ground all around me was littered with clothes, children's clothes, and the odd toy. I was so busy looking around that I didn't notice him walk straight up to me from behind and grab me by the nape. The fucker was way stronger than me. "Where you going, friend? I still need to take you down Central." I noticed his shirt was off, and he was sweating profusely, and he was covered in dirt. And in his hand, a fucking knife. Like a full-on kitchen knife, and there was something on it. I said, "What the fuck, man? What are you doing?" He replied something to the effect that he had some foul traps in the wood and that he was checking on them for game. He offered to show me. Recognizing that if I went with him, it would probably be my last choice I make, I twisted my body as much as I could and I punched him square in the face. And I ran. I ran as fast as I could. He yelled after me, "See you soon!" I ignored him and I kept running. Even though we had driven quite far, at least 5 or 6 miles, I still legged it all the way back and straight to the cops and told them everything. They said they would check it out and sent me home in a squad car. The next morning, I called Sarah and went over right away to check on her. I still wasn't over the creepy way the cabbie had been staring at her, and since he had picked me up from her place, he knew where she lived. I told her the story, and when I was done, she just stared at me in disbelief, not sure what to say. She just hugged me. At this point, the police rang, and I went outside to take the call. They told me that they went to check the specific area I had mentioned, finding none of the clothes or toys that I had seen. Neither were there any signs of foul traps or a knife. They did mention finding a few pieces of cut-up rope, but with nothing to go on, they just insinuated that I was having a laugh at their expense. I then called the minicab company, figuring I could at least lodge a complaint against the wacko. The idea that this could provoke him didn't even enter my head at the time. They said that they had no record of a car picking me up that night. One had been sent, but by the time it arrived, no one was waiting. This creeped me out all over again. How had he found me then? Was it random? Was I chosen? Could he have been listening in on their private car radio network or something? I left Sarah's place and headed back to mine. She was going to join me after helping her mom with some chores, and I wanted to go chill for a while. I should mention, at this point, that me and Sarah are now happily married, going on 8 years, and that all is well. However, that day, after I got home from her place and took a shower, I wandered over to the window. What I saw sent a chill down my spine, and still does whenever I think about it. I saw it. That fucking cream Mercedes station wagon, and the crazy cabbie staring at me, with such a cold, empty look on his face, until he slowly smiled and drove off. He told me I'd see him again. He wanted me to see him. He wanted me to know he could find me when he wanted. I still didn't understand how he had followed me, or what his intentions were, and I never told Sarah about this last incident. About a year later, I took out a loan and moved me and Sarah, we were engaged at that point, to another part of the country, and my parents followed soon after. Over the years, I've pondered, what was he going to do? Where was it he wanted to lead me? What were those noises? How had he found me? When had he cleaned up that spot in the woods? But most of all, why had he even picked me up that night? I suppose I should be happy that it was me and not some other poor victim who might not have reacted as I did. But just in case, crazy cabbie, let's not meet. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you can catch all of my future content. I will be doing a short Q&A this weekend, so if you have any questions you'd like to ask me, feel free to do it in the comments below or message them to me on Facebook or here. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.